All right, y'all. So Donald Trump wants to deploy more National Guard troops to American cities like Portland and Chicago. And why not, after they did such a good job cleaning up the streets of D.C.? No, literally. I mean, they've mostly just been picking up litter and raking leaves and shit on account of they ain't got much else to do in D.C. because despite what Trump said, turns out it ain't exactly the Mogadishu of the mid-Atlantic. Who knew? All right, but still, if there's one thing we can count on the Trump administration for, it's doubling down on dubious dumbassery. So even though the D.C. deployment has been objectively a complete waste of time and taxpayer dollars, Portland and Chicago are next, and for the same stated reason, because their soft, dim leaders have allowed each of these blue cities to devolve into gay Gotham, just overrun by Antifa terrorists, right? I've said it before, but it's so funny to me the way these people view the far left, especially in places like Portland. It's like, aren't they just a bunch of wispy soy boy cucks riding their unicycles to gender studies class and dreaming up pronouns and shit? Or are they a dangerous insurgency? An elite faction of Special Forces shadow queers capable of bringing Toby Keith's America to its knees at any time? Like, which is it, MAGA? You know, I guess one of the main reasons they say the Guard's needed in these cities right now is because ICE agents there are under siege by Antifa. But if that's true, shouldn't that be, like, really embarrassing for ICE? Like, patriots are supposed to trust these guys to rid the country of its scariest/brownest threats, but yet they can't even handle the barista brigade? Like, kind of makes it seem like ICE is just a bunch of big old bitches, if you ask me. Speaking of which, ICE just did a raid on a Chicago apartment building where they rappelled from helicopters in the middle of the night and terrorized a bunch of U.S. citizens, many of whom were children, by dragging them into the streets and ransacking their homes. And you just know they felt so cool doing it, too, especially because of that helicopter part. Like, in their minds, these guys are all, like, starring in an early 90s Steven Seagal movie, but in reality, they're starring in a 2020 Steven Seagal movie. Like, you know, the one where he's fat and sucks and everything's dumb about it all. But anyway, according to ICE, this mission was a success because they arrested 37 supposed gang members. But even if that's true, they still also traumatized nearly 300 innocent people in the process. So how does that math work? Like, if you were at a suburban Little League game and one dad gets drunk and belligerent, so someone calls the cops, and then they show up in riot gear, throwing flashbangs into the dugout and zip tying all your infielders and shit, like, is anybody going to say that was justified just because they also arrested Randy's drunk ass? No, you're going to say that that's bullshit, and most cops would say the same, you know, I mean, unless it was in a black neighborhood, then they'd probably say it was standard operating procedure, but still, you know what I mean, like, this is insanity. And they know that. They don't care. You know, in fact, it's all part of the plan. They're just going to keep escalating and instigating and pushing Americans further and further. And when we finally push back, Trump's just going to declare insurrection the way Michael Scott declared bankruptcy, and bam, martial law and the death of democracy. Well, we cannot give them what they want here, all right? Like, we have to keep protesting all this shit, sure, but without falling into their trap and becoming violent. Except for throwing sandwiches at them. That shit's hilarious. All right, YouTube, you know, I got more for you on this in just a second, but, you know, I see a story like this Chicago thing, and it just boggles my mind how anyone on any side of the political spectrum could be okay with something like that. But part of the reason is because of the way our media works. Let me show you what I mean. All right, let's take this article from the Grio with the headline, "Women and Children Reportedly Zip-Tied During Chicago ICE Raid." Now, I feel like even if you're kind of pro-ICE, you read that and you go, well, that seems excessive. They probably shouldn't have done that. That's a bad look. And you wonder, how could anyone disagree with that? But if we use the Ground News Chrome extension to click through the full coverage, you start to get an idea. That's what Ground News does. They compile all the coverage in one place so you can see all the sides of every story and make your own informed decisions. And up here we got the coverage breakdown. First of all, fewer sources than we normally see, but most noteworthy, nearly all of them are on either the left or the center. Very, very few on the right, and therein lies the rub. But if you use Ground News to sort by bias and look at the left-leaning outlets, they're making no bones about it. Egregious abuse of basic rights, fascism now, the end of American liberty. They're calling it like it is with this story, but on the right, they're not calling it at all. Only 4 sources, many of which are dubious, and even some of these right-leaning sources note that this raid swept up citizens and families. So sometimes if you don't know how to spin a story, you just don't do the story at all, right? And if you only get your news from right-leaning media, you might not ever even know that this happened. So you see something that makes you furious and you wonder how your neighbor doesn't care. This is how that happens, and that is the extra context and transparency that Ground News provides for you, so you can be as informed as possible and not let the media in this country dictate the narrative to you anymore. So if that sounds good to you, scan that QR code there, click the link in the description below to try Ground News today. You can get 40% off their highest tiered Vantage plan. That's the one with all the perks in it. That's the one that I use, and it's only $5 a month too. It's a sweet deal. So now's the time. Push back on the bias and BS. Try Ground News today. All right, YouTube, man, we're back. You know, but people aren't just standing by and letting this National Guard thing happen. Not yet anyway. Trump's being sued repeatedly for it. But of course, you know, competitive litigation is like a spectator sport for Donald Trump. I think he likes being sued on some level. But still, states are suing to keep it from happening. Portland, the state of Oregon, sued to keep Oregon National Guard from being deployed against their own citizens in Portland, and a judge said, yeah, they're right. You can't do that. You can't deploy National Guard against American citizens, at least not in these circumstances. And that's wouldn't be cool. That's my official judicial ruling. Wouldn't be cool. Sorry, Donald Trump. And then they were like, all right, fine. Just send in California and some other states. And the judge was like, wait, I just said you couldn't do that. And they're like, not exactly. Technically, you said we couldn't send in Oregon's troops. I don't know if you noticed, these are California's troops. You see how blonder they are or whatever? But yeah, it's like, so it's totally different. It's completely cool. And then, of course, Greg Abbott was just like, I'll volunteer my troops. I'll ruin their lives for a couple months. I don't give a shit about them anyway. Texas stands ready. You know, but that's the thing. It's like, it's not hitting for these troops either. I hope I don't live to regret these words, but sometimes I almost kind of think it will be okay even if he does get to successively deploy more and more National Guard troops in more and more American cities, because, like, they came to L.A., mostly stood around with their thumbs up their butt. They're fully thumb-butted in D.C. right now. I was just in D.C. It was kind of a joke. A lot of people felt bad for them. Like, they're not doing anything. Again, they've got them out there doing community service, fucking bagging up trash and shit. That's all they're doing. So it's like, it's costing people, it's costing taxpayer dollars, and it's also accomplishing next to nothing. And I think that if you do that in enough places, in enough cities, in enough states around this country, and enough nothing keeps happening, and enough National Guardsmen get bored to fucking tears and start missing their family and their home for completely bogus reasons, that, you know, it fizzle out or backfire against them eventually in the long run anyway. I don't know. I still fully believe that most National Guardsmen are not, like, fired up to go to these places and assault their fellow citizens. I really don't think that they're wired the same way that, say, you know, ICE agents seem to be, for example. Again, that's Chicago story. I don't know how you sleep at night, dude, doing stuff like that. Like, you have to be literally just a sadist to be, like, zip tying up 8-year-olds and shit and dragging them into the streets and then feeling nothing about it, or at worst, feeling what? Aroused, fired up, happy about it. Like, I don't understand, you know, who are these people? Where do they find them? I also feel like, you know, they ask for our sympathy a lot of times. It's like, you know, these people, they have to wear masks. You know why they have to wear masks? Because they feel like they're under threat at all times from other communities. They go into these communities and they're not safe. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's me. But I feel like if I was like, I had to keep myself anonymous while doing my job, because if my fucking community members and neighbors knew what I was doing for a living, they would shun me and ostracize me horrifically. I'd probably think, maybe this job ain't it. Maybe I should backflip off a bridge rather than keep doing this shit. Maybe I could preserve a single ounce of my humanity if I stop now. But no. You know, you'd think, like, yeah, maybe FEMA or something. Maybe do shit that, like, helps people. Like, nah, I'm way more into hurting people. And that seems to be, you know, if you're in the business of hurting people, businesses are booming in this country as of late, and that's a goddamn shame. But anyway, I don't know how it's going to go. It's like, I was going to say we're slow rolling fascism, but I don't know how slow it is. It's definitely here. But if it keeps being largely ineffective, then, you know, maybe again, we can push through this eventually anyway. But anyway, I'll be here to try to document it in, you know, comically folksy fashion. At least that's the idea. So thanks for watching. I'll put my things up here. So my special Trash Daddy. Please watch it if you ain't already, or watch it again. It's a fun distraction. Subscribe to the channel. You see all these videos, stand-up clips, cooking videos, other silly shit that I do, podcasts. The important one for me, that TraeCrowder.com. That's my website with my tour dates on it. Check it out. If I'm coming near you, get a ticket, come see me. If you like these, you'll like that. It's a fun time. We're having fun out there on the road, despite everything. So either way, though, if you keep watching these silly missives, I'll keep pumping them out, I reckon. I love you like chicken. Hang in there, everybody. See you. Bye.